Canada India Insight, episode number 8, produced by Impact Media and Events Corporation, and supported by Canada India USA Development Forum, the not-for-profit organization in Canada. Our guest today is Dube, Canada's Consul General in Mumbai. Annie joined the Department of Foreign Affairs and International Trade in 2003. At headquarters, she was recently the Deputy Director of the EU Commercial Relations and Advocacy Division from 2016 to 2017, and the Director of the Aerospace, Automotive, Defense, and Information and Communications Technologies Practices Division, pretty mouthful, from 2017 to 2018. Previous assignments at headquarters include, among other things, Deputy Director in the Office of the Deputy Minister for International Trade from 2007 to 2009, and Economic Policy Officer for Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation from 2003 to 2004. She has served abroad in positions including from 2005 to 2007 as Vice Consul and Trade Commissioner at the Consulate General in Mumbai from 2009 to 2011, First Secretary and Trade Commissioner at the Embassy to South Korea, and from 2011 to 2015 as Counselor and Senior Trade Commissioner at the Embassy to Switzerland. So with that, let us start the first question. With the first question, you have worked as a Vice Consul, as I just mentioned, and as a Trade Commissioner in Mumbai from 2005 to 2007, and now as the Consul General since 2018. In between, you have served in Switzerland, South Korea, Ottawa. So tell us what change you have seen in Mumbai and overall in India between 2007 and 2020. A lot has changed.
Well, there are things that don't change. Let's start with that. The great street food in Mumbai, obviously. The dynamism of the city. I find that Mumbai is very exciting and it never sleeps. There's always Bollywood to rely on, and the warmth of the Mumbai cars. So to me, this didn't change. It's always there, and it's always very exciting to discover where Mumbai is at. But what surprised me most when I returned in 2018 was Mumbai got a facelift, literally. The city exploded with the high-rise buildings and other infrastructure projects over the decade I was away. And you can read about it, but seeing it is very exciting. And I couldn't recognize most of the city. There's a part in central Mumbai that has just grown entirely. It was mills in Parel and Worli, etc. And now they have a lot of high rise there. And I still have a hard time finding my way around. I used to know the roads to get to the airport in Mumbai. Now it's like getting to the ceiling, and then I'm not sure. And it's a different way just to get to the airport. And I used to drive in Mumbai, and now I'm just lost at some point. So there's a lot of things that have changed from that perspective. But there's to me also the conglomerates. They have continued to grow, and they're mostly headquartered in Mumbai, as you know. But I'm always amazed at how sophisticated they are and the ambitious vision they have for their own organization and for India. And they have this global mindset that it's hard to describe, but India has a great global mindset that we need to capture somehow and have more of around the world. So to me, returning to Mumbai was very exciting, but especially because of my background as a trade commissioner, so the trade aspect. The economic development is always very exciting to see the growth and all, the ambition and the openness of the city, and by extension, the country. It was definitely a major attraction in that choice to return. And finally, returning to Mumbai was very much a personal choice as well. My husband and I met in Mumbai, and it is important to us that our children get to know their culture and see where they're from. So.
Okay. Yeah, because Dube is also an Indian surname.
No, I'm sure. I was sure you would ask that. I can tell you this is French Canadian.
So there is one more thing we have in common.
Yes, my husband's name is Aurora, so it's not. I don't have my husband's name, but most
Right.
people, when they meet me, they ask if I'm married to an Indian, and when I say yes, they're like, yes, because of Dube. I'm like, no, my husband is Aurora, and then they. I think it's a cultural difference there.
True, true. Well, you always learn, we always learn new things. So anyway, so the second one is, as you know, India is very bullish on the defense sector, and especially the Make in India initiative. And also it's opening up more, almost all the sectors, I would say now, for more foreign investment and collaborations. You are still currently a director on aerospace, automotive, and defense, right, at Global Affairs.
This
Um,
was my last role before going to India. Yes.
yes. So, what kind of opportunities you see, or you hear about in India's defense sector, and where can Canada participate in that?
Mhm. Well, it's always great to see that there's more opportunities for Canadian companies in India, and India's government is driving economic reforms at a pace never seen before. This has resulted, obviously, in significant progress in the World Bank Ease of Doing Business annual report from ranking 125 to 64 over a few years. But it's true that India has recently issued a new version of the Defense Acquisition Policy and the Defense Procurement Manual 2020. Obviously, it puts an emphasis on self-reliant India by encouraging domestic firms to produce defense-related equipment. When it comes to the Canadian part of it, Canadian defense firms are really well positioned to partner with Indian small and medium enterprises to provide them technological support to cater to Indian OEMs pitching for defense businesses. With 660 firms or so from a Canadian perspective, we're very dependent on international trade, investment, research, and development. But I believe
Again, the
that
last part, the 660, what was that?
yes, Canada's defense and security sector has over 660 firms and is
Okay.
largely dependent on international trade, investment, research, and development. So we have a nice size of number of Canadian firms, but they cannot just operate with it domestically. They need to go out and seek opportunities around the world.
Right.
We do believe that the opportunities go way beyond, however, the current and more traditional sectors. Like there's defense sector, but we should not limit ourselves to that sector. Yes, it's
Yeah.
one of the sectors that were covered before, but technology, water and wastewater, infrastructure, automotive, agriculture, and agri-food are several these sectors, clean tech, education, as well as emerging technologies like AI
Yeah.
and other information and communication technologies are all sectors where we've seen a lot more interest and complementarities between Canada and India.
Yeah.
Uh,
No,
and
but
mostly what I've seen, thank you. What I've seen in the last few years, and that frankly, it's hard to um, when we look at the relationship between Canada and India, we cannot underestimate the value of the relationship. And when we look at just Brookfield and Fairfax,
yeah.
two companies, obviously, which alone have invested over $25 billion in India. This is massive. And we've witnessed a lot of other Canadian institutional investors that they set up offices in India, and their collective investment is now estimated to exceed $45 billion.
Yeah, even the pension
Last,
plan, Ontario,
exactly.
Canada. Yeah.
And just last week, Brookfield Asset Management, it was reported that they bought an Indian developers, RMZ Corporation, for $2 billion. So it keeps adding up. And the same week, CPPIB and Brookfield were eyeing the purchase of almost 600 megawatts of solar assets from Mahindra Groups. So there's a lot of strategic investment, and it totally aligned with the government of India's top priority.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a lot of other great Canadian success stories. Sun Life, obviously, that had a joint venture with Aditya Birla for years now, and they help safeguarding over 2 million Indians with life insurance products. Canada is contributing to India's infrastructure boom. Roughly 8% of the steel manufactured in India over the last year was made using Canadian natural resources.
Wonderful. Okay.
When we think of smart cities, Canada is playing a role in that aspect as well, with some firms providing design and engineering for many of India's top smart cities. The one that I find very much interesting is when you look at the cell phone market in India, Airtel and Jio, they use a Canadian software that allows millions of subscribers to manage their accounts every day. So the Canadian software is helping Indian taxpayers as well e-file their income taxes. So we're not necessarily seen, it's not a brand that people will recognize, but we're doing a lot of the work that make India operate really quick and fast. And we have a lot of um, great companies that can provide that type of expertise so that India can leapfrog into the future.
Okay, so yeah, so that's what I'm coming to the next question. Actually, over the last, I would say 1 year, maybe year and a half, there have been several high-level interactions, conferences, webinars, going on between Canada and India, including the Canada-India virtual conference, which we hosted ourselves on September 30th. So, I mean, that begs the question: what is going on with such a flurry of activities? Suddenly, are we looking at a new era in Canada-India bilateral relations, or was there any one particular factor or something, for such an impressive turnaround?
I don't think it's one specific thing, but just this pandemic means that everybody has to go online, and so everything is happening virtually, and so it's also available and open for more people. So the visibility of the relationship may be more out there right now. There's always scope, obviously, and interest from both sides to continue building the relationship. But not having to board a flight, a great Air Canada flight, direct flight, Toronto, Delhi, by the way, but still, not having to travel
Yeah.
and do all like the time spent in the plane and all, you just spend the time in building the relationship directly. There's no travel right now. Even though we know that in India, the personal touch is important. And so
Yeah.
eventually we'll need to solidify all of that by the personal presence in the market. But this pandemic has meant that a lot of the meetings, summits, discussions that would bring a certain number of people, whoever can show up in India and at certain level. And so instead of having maybe 50, 100, 200 people, we can have thousands of people now online that can really start thinking about building their India strategy, building their knowledge about the market, and considering seriously entering the place. We see a lot of visitors usually in Mumbai. It's a revolving door of visits from
Yeah.
the private sector to the public sector. And it currently is the high season, the summits, the discussions.
Yeah.
And so I would say that the pandemic is one of the factors why it's more visible, but the interest on both sides, when I think of the recent discussions between the two governments, our foreign and trade ministers have spoken often on various platforms and are exploring ways to work more closely together. And through this pandemic, both governments in India and Canada have supported each other right throughout in the repatriation of thousands of citizens from our respective countries. And there's an ongoing keenness on both sides to do more together. And the pandemic, of course, is amplifying that as well. So.
Yeah, because I personally know many webinars, conferences, minister to minister level interactions, both federally, provincially, and even the city level. Just the city of Brampton recently hosted an event with India 2 days ago. So not just federally, but even provincially, different provinces, different chambers of commerces, private organizations, not-for-profits. So so much is going on non-stop. Sometimes you have 2 webinars, 2 conferences on the same day at the same time. Sometimes even the speakers are the same. You are in one conference, 2 hours later, you join another one, you see the same speaker again. So,
and that's a great opportunity. Patrick Brown, by the way, mayor of Brampton was in Mumbai last year. So I met with him then, and it's great that he's continuing his engagement with India. I think that this is one of the lessons that any companies out there who are interested in the market, they have to commit 1 week a year to go and spend in India and meet with people. That's the bottom line to build relationship with India. But it's also true for any other organization that have an interest in the Indian market, and vice versa. And so I'm glad to see that there's a continued engagement from the Canadian side as well. It should be both ways. A relationship is always the two sides coming together, right?
Yeah, it's always
So
a
it's
two-way
good.
street. Trade, as all they say, is a two-way street. I have also started to hear, now there's a growing webinar fatigue as well setting in, because there are too many going on, and people expect you to participate in everything. Oh, you don't have to travel, you don't have to go anywhere, so there's no excuse. But sometimes people don't remember that things sometimes start at 7, 8 in the morning, and then you can't sit in front of a screen all day just participating in events and webinars and conferences. You have got work to do.
Well,
So
the other thing is, the reality is we most of the time work from home. So you may have my son or my daughter walking at one
yeah,
point, or you may hear them in the background, and it's part of the reality. And we just keep going. So it's an
uh,
interesting time, I have to say.
yeah. So with all these activities going on, can we now safely say that we have put the little bit of stress or strain in the relationship behind now for good?
Well, I'm not sure which strain or stress are you're referring to. I mean, there's been interesting moments in the relationship, but
Yeah,
it's like if I think of my husband and I, it's not rosy every day, and the closest relationship are often the
yeah,
ones with a few more friction because we do care deeply about each other.
yeah. True, true.
Uh,
Well, yeah, just like in any
so
individual
to
relationship,
me,
I
if
mean,
there's been a bit of friction, it's just
part of the game. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So as
And so
as
to me,
you,
if there's a bit of friction, it's a healthy sign. It's a healthy
yes,
sign if there's a bit of friction, because it means that we are committed to the relationship.
absolutely, and that makes sure that you make an extra effort, to amend it and to come even more closer than before. Um, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, sure. The picture froze, just for a few seconds. So, yeah, as we were just saying, I mean, people-to-people ties has been a cornerstone in Canada-India bilateral relations. Because when you talk about bilateral relations, I mean, it involves people. Right. So the pandemic has really crushed travel, tourism, and people-to-people exchanges. How has it impacted? Although we do all these online activities, but how has it impacted the bilateral ties overall? And how soon do you expect to recover the immigration as well as the student exchanges?
Well, you're right. People to people ties are a cornerstone of the Canada India relationship, and it's underpinning virtually all areas of the relationship. It's all about the people. The growing community of people of Indian origin in Canada is, we keep saying 1.3 million, but frankly, I feel like it's been the same
Yeah,
number for years. So I'm pretty sure it's higher than that,
sure.
and
Yeah,
including my family, my husband and kids. So the largest Indian diaspora in the world on a per capita basis is here in Canada. And they all make an incredible contribution to our societies, from cultural industries, academia, to the business world and politics. But it also means that Canadians feel at home and welcome in India, which really is great when it comes to strengthening the people-to-people linkages. Um, when you mentioned the impact of COVID on tourism, you're totally right. Tourism from India to Canada were up by 92% in the last 5 years,
yeah.
15% last year alone, topping 300,000 per year. And yes, tourism has been negatively impacted in both Canada and India, as everywhere around the world. But the close family members have been permitted to enter and to the beginning of travel restrictions when they were imposed by Canada. And earlier this month, more measures have been introduced to allow more people to enter Canada safely. Students destined to learning institutes, for example, who have an approved COVID-19 readiness plan may enter Canada. Extended family members traveling for essential reasons may also be granted permission to enter Canada. And we've further introduced measures to allow entry to foreign nationals on compassionate grounds. Canada is also ensuring foreign workers who perform essential and critical function continue to be allowed to work in Canada. And these are occupations that assist with our infrastructure, our healthcare, and our supply chain, just to name a few. In fact, last April, I remember putting health workers on planes back then to make sure they could be back to work in our healthcare system through this pandemic.
Yeah.
But we do fully understand that immigration is vital to Canada's economic recovery. And for this reason, my colleagues at Immigration, Refugee and Citizenships Canada, they've not stopped and will continue to process immigration applications. It's true we've had a disruption this year due to COVID-19, but now is the time more than ever, as you know, to work together to attract and retain new Canadians. And when I reflect, going back to the people-to-people ties, when I look at our consular operations back in April, May, and June, we helped more than 25,000 Canadian citizens and permanent residents returning home. And I have to say that people-to-people ties are alive and well. It was a bit surprising numbers.
Yeah, well, I mean, while it may be allowed, maybe the governments are allowing a certain set of people to come, but the fact is, you still have to wear a mask. There's a long flights, and it's quarantining and whatnot. So a lot of inconveniences, So people may prefer to put it off unless they really have to. So that does affect, business and everything else. So now China, as you know, the one country that everybody is talking about these days for one reason or the other. China is the elephant in the room right now. Both Canada and India have their own specific challenges with China. Canada is now taking an increasingly tougher line for the last few weeks in terms of public statements, being made by the defense minister, the prime minister, other ministers. So is there any effort to tackle this together? And would Canada be willing to consider something like a Quad, with India and others? I mean, I'll be asking that question to federal ministers also, but just your take on it.
Well, the government of Canada, as you know, it will continue to stand up for our values and interests. And so this is something that will continue no matter what. And we do recognize the need to increase our cooperation with India and other partners to defend the rules-based international order. This is definitely important to Canada. We do share a commitment with India to the rules-based international order and multiculturalism in the Indo-Pacific and globally. So Canada regularly engages and cooperates with India on issues of regional and international securities. When it comes to China, I'm no China expert, so you may want to redirect your question to the expert on the relationship with China.
Fair enough. So how has the pandemic affected? Well, I won't push you on that further. How has the pandemic affected the consulate operations in Mumbai, and how have you pivoted actually to the new realities, to provide the same level of service that people expect from their Canadian consulate? Because life is not the same,
Well,
the way you do your work is not the same.
Oh. Well, in Mumbai, because of monsoon, usually once or twice a year, we have to close the consulate because there's flooding somewhere in the city. So we were ready to have a work from home posture in terms of mobility tools. So I can tell you that for our 40 plus employees in Mumbai, the work from home posture was imposed. I think it was 13 March that I imposed it on the employees. Usually we have, out of the 40 something employees, we have 8 Canadian based staff and the rest are locally hired. We're responsible for the states of Maharashtra, Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh, and Goa. And we have sections covering trade and investment, cultural and public affairs, consular services to Canadians, as well as some partners co-locating with us, including the province of Quebec, the province of Ontario, and Export Development Canada. Like most organizations, obviously, when the pandemic hit, we adopted quickly the work from home posture, and we kept only essential staff, Canadian staff on the ground. So we were down to 3 Canadians instead of the usual 8 at the time. And when India closed its airspace later in March, it became obvious for us that we would become overnight travel agents. And when you ask how we pivoted, we became travel agents. So we all the work that we usually do, from trade to investment to any of the even the provinces, and Export Development Canada, all their resources, we were all focusing on supporting Canadians. And usually in Mumbai, we have 1 or 2 employees doing consular work, supporting Canadian in when they're in distress abroad or renewing passport, that kind of things. But in the context of national lockdown with movement restrictions, no commercial options available by air or land, serious health risk for our employees, obviously. The network of mission we have in India, the High Commission in Delhi, along with the 3 consulates general, negotiated flights, needed to capture the data of Canadians wanting to travel, where were they located, how would they make their way to the airport, did they have the right permissions for ground movement, did they have access to a vehicle. Figuring all of these authorizations that were required was a process in itself, with obviously changing and evolving authorizations. We needed to organize ground transportation, and the first flight we did, in less than 24 hours, we had to organize that. And my employees, until 3-4 in the morning, calling Canadians to confirm their flights. It's, you know, it's quite amazing to see the dedication and the professionalism of the team that I've seen in Mumbai, but also across India for the Canadian operations there. So obviously doing all of this and getting all the authorization while having thousands of Canadians very anxious to return home and to be on that flight.
Yeah.
And I spoke to so many Canadians when I was in India. Most of them had my WhatsApp message. They could WhatsApp me or call me, and being up like for a few nights here and there, or sleeping very little, so that they could get on these flights. It was an interesting experience. It became a consular operation, and we usually have only a couple of people I mentioned for that, but the full contingent of employees across India became consular agents. And usually, you know, some of them would be trade commissioners and would help companies get access to the market. But when they started helping Canadians getting out and people being so grateful, I've had messages from Canadians, and someone mentioned at one point, he sent me a direct message saying, "We came safely back home. My 9-year-old son wanted to make sure that I would connect with you to thank you and all the team, because he knows that it was very difficult to get us home. So thank you so much." It was so touching, really, really touching. And I've seen across the pandemic so many great human stories. It was a lot of work. It was not easy for Canadians and for us, but I have a lot of respect, obviously, for the team across India, and specifically for my team. We took over the local operations like they've done that before, and it was like we have a lot of visitors in Mumbai. Well, it was another high level visit times 300 kind of thing. And so they did calls and organized everything. And in a pandemic, you don't want to put their health at risk, so most of them were doing that from home. It was an interesting situation, so many lessons learned there. And I know it was not easy, and we didn't do everything perfectly. There were some great stories, but some not so great. But what we know is people came back safely.
Yeah, well, because you're human too. I mean, there's only so much you can do.
And there's only so much we control in the context of a national lockdown. Yeah.
True. So apart from the repatriation flights and some little bit flights here and there, small number of flights as part of the bubble arrangement, as they say. When do you think the regular normal two-way flights can resume? Because there is now a growing number of people who are asking for life to come back to normal. How long? I mean, can you put everything on hold? And people are now aware of the situation, so they do take their own precautions. So there is a growing feeling, that you should now open up everything and allow people to travel, to run their offices, businesses. with precautions. So when do you think regular travel can resume between the two
Well,
countries?
as you know, from a Canadian perspective, our borders are still closed for non-essential travel, but we
Yeah.
are welcoming a lot of people. Like family reunification is very important to us. Work permit holders, permanent residents, Canadian citizens obviously can all come in. Um, when it comes to the pandemic, I don't have a timeline. I can tell you. I wish I knew, and I think we're all in the same situation. And there's also on the Indian side when they want to reopen the airspace. And I think that we need to be prudent in terms of how we go back to the normal self, because we see the second wave coming through right now, and it's not hitting, it's not as nice as the first one. It's hitting harder in some places in the world. And so there's precaution to be taken. And I think that as much as we all want to travel and go back to the normal and the before pandemic, we will need to be with that for a bit longer.
Yeah, so I mean, is there any official discussions or some back channel discussion going on? Maybe let's say December, January, some potential timelines, that is being discussed.
There are specific triggers that we're looking at in terms of number of case increases, number of deaths, obviously.
Yeah.
And as you've seen the numbers, India is the second most affected country in the world. So as much as we want to open to everybody, we're not even allowing the Americans to come in. Obviously, it's the first most affected country, but we are we need first to look at Canadians' health and safety. That's our top priority. But we also know that immigration is an important component. So we need to balance these things. And I think that right now, that's what we're doing. And we are always reassessing the situation so we can adjust as needed.
Okay.
So
So
I don't have a timeline. It all depends on how it evolves.
true. So from the more serious topics, now let's talk about your podcast. Um, See something that brings smile instantly. The the Canada and India show. So how long you have been doing it? What kind of people you talk to? Where did the idea came from? And how has it been going for you so far?
Well, it's probably one of the most exciting thing I've done since I'm back in Mumbai, simply because it's something that it was definitely not needed, but something I wanted to do. And let's just put it out there, diplomacy and podcasting are usually not used in the same sentence. So it's kind of innovating in a way.
Yeah.
And how it came about, I was within Global Affairs, we have a podcast, and it's talking to employees, having a chat with one of the deputy minister or something about any of the files that we're talking about or
Internally.
working on internally. And I kept wondering, and at the same time, I was wondering, how can we better promote or promote differently the Canada-India narrative? Most people will see the stats and read about it, but there's a lack of nuance, I find. And so anyone who's interested in growing and nurturing the relationship, I was looking at bringing the stuff, like, you need to feel India at one point. You cannot just read about it. You need to live it. You need to feel it. And being able to hear the stories of the people, I found that it was something to explore. And that's very exploratory at this point, the podcast. It's a niche podcast. So you can read about Canada, India, and we can learn about the relationship through different medium, but statistics aren't cutting it. It's not enough to make you feel the excitement and dynamism of the relationship. So companies don't decide one day they sign the deal. People do. Universities don't start exchanging informations, students or joint projects. It's people do that. Think tanks don't just decide to develop papers together and how to advance a relationship. People do. And so having someone telling you what they're doing, their life, and the kind of impact they are creating adds to how we can grasp the scope of the relationship. It comes down to people, and I wanted to capture the essence of people who make this relationship so vibrant. So in the podcast, we cover anything from trade investment to human rights, arts and culture, and foreign policy. So the most important when we approach potential guests is that there's a link between Canada and India. The person can be Indo-Canadian, the person can be heading a subsidiary of a Canadian company in India. They don't need to be Canadian themselves or Indian living now in Canada, but there's a link somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And you can listen to season 1 and 2. They're currently out there on any platform you listen to your podcast. So on the podcast app from Apple or Stitchers, or we're on Lisbon. There's a bunch of apps that provide podcast support, so you can look at it.
Yeah,
It's the Canada in India show.
I know. So on the podcast itself, actually, it shows multiple platforms, where you can listen to it, watch it. It's pretty amazing, Google Play and YouTube and whatnot. So keep up the great work.
And we had, thank you, we had to temporarily suspend our programming given the crisis, obviously, because all our resources, our priority was over the last 6 months to support Canadians wanting to return home. We're hoping to work on season 3 soon enough, but right now it's been suspended since we can get back to a bit more normal operations. But to me, this is an exciting medium it's all about showcasing the relationship differently, and so that people have a better feel of what's happening.
Absolutely. To end on a personal note, we have spent several years in Amchi, Mumbai, as they say, in Marathi. So has the cricket and the films, Hindi films, the spicy food, vada pav sort of, caught up with you yet? Or if so, then tell us a bit about your favorite actors, your favorite cricketers, your favorite Indian dish, things like that.
Well, when my husband and I got married in Delhi, my mother-in-law showed me how to make halva, which was really good. Not because I made it, but because I think it's very tasty. But I think that the traditional butter chicken or palak paneer is always an easy go-to for me. I like the taste. It's spicy, and I don't think spices always agree with me, but I still enjoy very much Indian food. And paneer overall is something that made almost in any way is something that I really appreciate.
Okay.
When it comes to actors, it's probably because I met her in the context of the podcast, but also I read her book, Close to the Bone. I am a big fan of Lisa Ray. Yes, I know she's Canadian with a lot of different origins there, but really, if you didn't listen to her interview, I read her book before interviewing her, and I had such a deeper appreciation of how it came about in her life and all the circumstances that brought her to who she is today. It's just, I really think that she's a great person, and that her contribution to Bollywood, but overall, is quite exciting to see where she's going with that. So I really like her. And being in Mumbai, obviously, there's Bollywood and so many good movies out there. But I do appreciate a lot the documentaries that the documentaries to me allow to look into some parts of the societies that I would not be able to otherwise. It's not like I can walk into a village in someone's house and just observe how some things happen, but documentaries allow me to see that.
Yeah.
And so I was really touched with the documentary that Viba Bakshi directed and produced, Sunrise, S-O-N, Sunrise. It was endorsed by UN Women, and it's about men fighting for women's right in Haryana. It was shot in Haryana. It's shockingly beautiful and touching. I really appreciated that one. There's also the series in Netflix, Delhi Crime, that I found was quite difficult to watch at times. It was written and directed by Canadian Richie Mehta, and it's also on Netflix Canada. But to me, that was an eye-opener as well, in terms of a look inside what happened after the 2012 gang rape. So I know you need to do a PG something in your video here. There's a lot of other movies, obviously, including the ones by the none other than Deepa Mehta. So there's great things happening. The ones that I appreciate are really the ones that makes me understand more India, often that I just cannot see because of the law. It's like, it's obvious I cannot just see understanding the culture is a challenge, and it takes time. And this to me is where I find a lot of value in the documentaries. So looking at the challenges and why people behave in a certain way or another, and the interactions between different communities, I find that fascinating.
True. So the reason why I was asking about cricket as well, I mean, there is a big IPL tournament going on right now. Is it on in your house now? Cricket these days?
Uh,
Um,
I think my husband watches a bit of that, but
yeah.
I met a cricket player at one point. I didn't know who he was, and he was a really known cricket player. And I was apologetic because I don't know. But my husband watches a bit of cricket. Obviously, he's a good Indian.
Yeah, well, the reason I'm asking about cricket specifically is not just as a hobby, but as you know, cricket is really big in India, even in terms of business also.
Mhm.
Lately, we see some T20 cricket tournaments in Canada as well.
Yeah.
A lot of international stars and cricketers have visited Canada,
Mhm.
and this is the second time that IPL is being hosted outside of India. So is this something that maybe Canada should look into? That will be a great people to people exchange. It will be a great money earner for both the economies, and it can take the bilateral relations, much closer, much faster. And then that can be complemented by whatever else is going on in the diplomatic circles.
And this is something that it's been raised in the past, and I think that's when I met Mayor of Brampton, Patrick Brown, last year, because he was at this dinner with the cricketers who I didn't know,
Yeah,
because he was referring to the I think it's the T20 that was happening in Canada back a certain time back, and so we um, sports diplomacy. How can I put that? Sports
yeah,
diplomacy is another way of promoting the relationship, and I do believe strongly that you cannot just talk about trade or about foreign policy, because everything is interlinked, and so you
definitely.
have to look at all the aspects of what each country bring to the table. And cricket is so strong in India. Obviously, it's a great sport, but in Canada as well, it's played plenty. When I live in Ottawa, on the grounds of Rideau Hall, every summer there's people playing cricket on the grounds there. So I see cricket being played also in Canada. So there's probably a lot of scope for collaboration on that front.
Yeah, actually, it's unfortunate. Canada used to have a good team, and then they performed well in the World Cups also. Um, I miss to see the Canadian team. We used to watch Canada play the World Cup when I was in India, and now when I'm here for the last 20 years, we don't see a Canadian team, performing well in the World Cup. So that's kind of a bit of an unfortunate thing. But anyway, cricket and hockey as well. I mean,
Yes, it's
it's
true.
big in both countries. So maybe
It's true.
that's one aspect we should explore. Both the countries should explore, I would say. Um, so I guess that's it. If you want to add anything more, I mean, on the work, life in Mumbai, overall Canada,
Well,
India.
no, I'm just thinking, going back to your question about cricket, you may want to start a team. So if there's none already, it's we all can contribute. And I think that if someone sees a gap and there's an interest for it, then we should just move ahead on this. I don't think the government has any business in deciding if there's a cricket team in Canada or not. So I think that it would be great to see a team in Canada, so we can have these exchanges between Canada and India.
Yeah,
And
and
then
there's
the expertise would come from India to teach Canadians how to play cricket.
of course, there are several Indian origin cricketers in the Canadian team also, as well as your former coach. So there is a lot going on there as well. So it's been a pleasure talking to you.
Mhm.
If I have missed anything, if you want to add anything, please feel free.
Thank you so much. I do believe strongly in the Canada-India relationship, not only because that's the right thing to do, I'm a diplomat, etc., but because I
Yeah.
live it every day personally. And so, to me, it's not just a question of how we can grow it, but how long it's going to take to get to the next level. And so of the relationship. So anything you need from your end as well, please do reach out. I'm always a strong supporter of the relationship. So thank you so much for having me.
Thanks a lot. Sorry, it took us a few days, to put this together. A little
Sorry.
bit back and forth, but in the end, I mean, it all came out well. So we'll publish it in the publication coming out tomorrow, and then post it on the website, YouTube, everywhere. And as I mentioned, let's keep in touch and continue to promote the bilateral relations as much as we can.
Thank you so much for having me, and all the best with the publication.
Yeah, so stay safe and have a nice day. Bye for now.
Thank you.